But anyway, guys, straight into the first topic of today. We shall be talking about Burberry first because I think that there are so many interesting things to say about Burberry. So if you are new to this conversation, about 4 months ago, as you can see here on the screen, I did a live stream that was titled Why Burberry is Seriously Struggling and It May Not Get Better. Now, that live stream is almost 3 hours long, so it's very hard for me to summarize everything that was said in that live stream. But essentially, I was talking about why Burberry's pricing and marketing strategy didn't work and why, unless they changed those two things, they would continue to have a tanking stock price. Their stock price at the time was seriously tanking. The revenue figures were down. Everything looked bleak. And I made so many different points in that live stream. I mean, it's 3 hours long. We looked at articles in the Financial Times. We looked at every single runway show that Daniel Lee had done at Burberry at the time. We looked at their branding, the fact that they're using the equestrian knight design and what that actually means for the branding and the marketing of Burberry. So we looked at everything, to be honest. And it's quite crazy that the CEO, the current CEO of Burberry, has come out and has finally admitted that their pricing strategy was wrong and they made a mistake raising prices as high as they did, which essentially just proves that everything I said was right in terms of the pricing strategy not making any sense. And so this is kind of what we want to talk about today, talking about exactly what the CEO said and looking at the article in the Business of Fashion where they interviewed Joshua Schulman, who is the current CEO of Burberry. The CEO before is a man named Jonathan Ackroyd. He was the former CEO of Versace, very well experienced. I think he's definitely someone that knows what he's doing. He just kind of, I think, overestimated the value of Burberry or overestimated how consumers see Burberry and how much you can realistically charge for pieces made by Burberry. I think that was just a big mistake that they made. So, of course, since then, he has left Burberry. They now have a new CEO called Joshua Schulman. He was one of the former CEOs of Coach, which makes a lot of sense. Coach is at a lower price point, but Coach is also doing really well. So I think they made the right decision with, hiring Joshua Schulman. But anyway, let's look at the article. Let's read through the article and see what was said, because I think this article is very, very interesting. So it's titled, Luxury's Pricing Reality Check. Value for money matters, even at high-end brands. This week, Mulberry joined Burberry and Capri in admitting rampant price inflation has contributed to a collapse in demand. Will others follow suit? And that's very interesting because, of course, it's not just Burberry that admitted. You have Mulberry and also Capri, but I'm focusing mainly on Burberry because that's like the big story that we've been talking about on this channel specifically. So continuing on, it says, there is a growing consensus that rampant price inflation has weakened luxury's value proposition, contributing to a collapse in demand, and leaders are starting to take action. This week, British handbag brand Mulberry, a longtime champion of accessible luxury, signaled it was no longer accessible enough. Amid falling sales and widening losses, new CEO Andrea Baldo said the company would retool its merchandising to bring most of its bags below the threshold of £1,100, which is $1,375, where its flagship Bayswater style sits. Now, before we continue, isn't it kind of strange? And I want to know what you guys think about this, that at the drop of a bucket, brands and companies can just raise and reduce prices as they see fit. And that proves to you, every time I keep telling you that, these garments don't cost a lot of money to produce. Even though people like to make the argument that, okay, even if it's really cheap to produce, you have to pay for the marketing. Even with all of those things considered, the profit margins are still insane. And they are literally proving to you that the profit margins are insane because they are just raising and reducing the price however they see fit. So clearly it isn't affecting their bottom line that much. They just wanted to see if they could maximize profits, and they've realized that the consumers aren't going for it. So they've decided, okay, let's just reduce prices now. I think actually them admitting that they raised the prices too high is actually taking away from the allure of luxury. It's almost, I feel like a lot of things that have been happening recently has kind of been breaking down all these barriers and kind of breaking the dream of luxury. Everything is kind of disintegrating before our eyes. But let me continue reading through the article. It says, new designs had been more expensive in recent years following the lead of top luxury names. We were asking the customer for a little bit too much, Baldo told Bloomberg. Can you imagine the CEO of Mulberry saying we were asking the customer for a little bit too much. That's insane. Continuing on, it says, going forward, the idea is to focus on providing value for market in the luxury space. Capri Holdings, the ailing owner of American accessible luxury giant Michael Kors, struck a similar tone on an investor call earlier this month. The brand attempted to elevate price points too quickly over the last 2 years in accessories, footwear, and ready-to-wear, Chairman John Idle said. Simultaneously, we significantly reduced our signature product offering and inventory levels while injecting too much fashion for our core consumer. As a result, we had to promote deeper to drive sales. And this also happened to Burberry, which we'll get to, but because their prices were so high, everything went into very heavy sales. And once again, I feel like that messes up the allure and the dream of luxury. But continuing on, it says, Italian stablemate Versace will lower average prices too. Broader assortments with price points targeting aspirational luxury consumers are being introduced this quarter, Idol added. The comments follow Burberry's move this summer to install a CEO with a more accessible American take on luxury. Joshua Schulman, formerly chief executive of Coach, while continuing to brush off the notion that Burberry would downgrade to the accessible luxury segment, Schulman has said that the brand went too far in its effort to reposition as a top luxury name, particularly in leather goods where it is less credible. Now, let me pause there, because I think Jonathan Ackroyd, who was the CEO previously of Burberry, I think one of the big reasons why he hired Daniel Lee in the first place is because Daniel Lee came from Bottega, and Bottega is something that sells at very high price points, especially with leather goods. But that's what Bottega is known for, leather goods. Burberry isn't known for leather goods. So I don't know why they thought just because they are bringing Daniel Lee to Burberry, they can just charge Bottega prices and the consumers would buy it. It's such a strange phenomenon. Like, the reason why Bottega was charging what they were charging when Daniel Lee was there is not because of Daniel Lee. It's because the consumers are used to spending that kind of money at Bottega, because that's kind of what the price point has been for the brand the whole time. So them thinking that Daniel Lee could be the sole reason why they could increase prices, to me, made no sense. And it's actually insane that it took this long for them to realize that. This is also a point that I brought up in my live stream 4 months ago when I was talking about why they need to change their strategy. Otherwise, things would continue going downhill for Burberry. But continuing on with what Josh Schulman said, he said, in terms of pricing, these past few years, we have been very focused at the top of the pyramid, especially in leather goods, he told investors at a November 14th strategy update. During the past 2 years, Burberry's previous management initially defended price increases as a matter of keeping up with the Joneses, which, once again, was something that I was very much against and said it was a huge mistake. Benchmarking against French and Italian luxury brands as part of its elevation strategy, before struggling to recalibrate merchandising fast enough to stem falling sales. Going forward, most bags will be priced under €2,000. This is where we have had strong success in the past and where we were about 18 to 24 months ago, Schulman said. And so isn't that insane? Isn't that insane that they can just wake up one day and be like, okay, let's start pricing bags under €2,000. It's so insane. It's actually so insane. And I totally agree. Burberry overestimated its demand. Totally. As LV is finding out, one cannot expand the customer base and keep the same brand identity. That is also very true. Someone saying, sorry, but I didn't get what excuse they used to increase their prices. They didn't use an excuse. They just increased the prices. There was no excuse. They kind of said the reason is it's in line with the luxury market. That was something that I read in an interview all the way back then when Daniel Lee was first hired at Burberry, but they didn't necessarily give any excuses. They just raised the prices and said it was, to align with the broader luxury market. But continuing on in this article, because I think it's so interesting and eye-opening. It says, Burberry, Michael Kors and Mulberry's comments come as no surprise, as the notion that prices are simply too high takes hold across fashion. Industry insiders increasingly agree that the sector's slowdown is in part linked to a price valuation equation that's out of sync with reality. More accessible luxury players like Mulberry, Michael Kors and Burberry have more leeway to address the situation head-on, as their chief executive's recent comments show. But pure luxury players taking a hit, including Kering, LVMH and Richemont, the way forward is less clear. Luxury products are meant to be expensive, that they should feel like a stretch for all but the wealthiest consumers usually goes without saying. But even rich people don't want to be taken for a ride. And data supports the notion that brands have pushed prices too far, too fast. Over the past 50 years, brands have historically raised prices by 5 to 7% annually, already more than twice the rate of inflation. Since the pandemic, most brands raised prices even faster by a double-digit percentage annually. A November 21st report by Bernstein found. Now, before we continue reading, it's quite interesting, and this is something that I've mentioned before, that in a time of economic downturn, these brands thought it would be a good idea to raise prices at record rates. When I tell you that some of these people making the decisions in business for these brands are so out of touch with reality, and why they are out of touch with reality is we all know that the luxury market relies on mainly middle class and working class consumers to scale. Yes, the rich consumers buy luxury fashion too. They buy all the expensive pieces. Some of them buy the haute couture pieces. But if we're talking about scale, when you look at the history of these brands, when they were selling to kings and queens and celebrities and movie stars, and that was it, they didn't make that much money. It was, the likes of Bernard Arnault that brought in this new business model of you sell the dream so that you can sell belts and footwear and perfumes, and people buy it for really crazy prices, and really marketing that heavily, right? So these brands rely on the middle and working class for mass growth. And so if you price those people out, you're only left with the people that have loads of money, and you're back to square one. You're back to the kind of money that these brands used to make when we're talking about the earlier times in the history of a lot of these brands, where that was their only customer base. If you want to make the amount of money that a lot of these companies make, everyone from all classes has to buy something from your company for you to be able to scale to that size. And so the second that what I call the Bernard Arnault business model became a thing in luxury, the second that you price the masses out of your goods, you're going to see a downturn in your stock prices and your sales are going to go down. That is just what's going to happen. It's common sense. So why they didn't know that, why they didn't realize that, and why they don't see that shocks me till now. It's really, really shocking to me. But anyway, continuing on, it says, price increases have cut off middle-class aspirational consumers from the core products of top brands, he added. This is particularly the case in handbags, where finding regular size products at less than $3,000 from reputed brands has virtually become impossible. The dramatic increases were symptomatic of the industry's complacency, as if the post-pandemic boom would continue forever, as well as the result of over-reliance on benchmarking, with executives believing they can sell items at higher prices simply because that's what others are doing. The continued outperformance of Hermès, which has raised prices by around 20% since the pandemic, compared to an industry average of close to 40%, is surely linked to a more favorable, stable impression of value for money offered by the French brand. What can top luxury players do next? Lowering prices isn't an option, at least not publicly, and brands are loath to bring back end of season markdowns that took years to phase out. Even talking about the notion of value for money feels antithetical for brands with a top end positioning. In an October investor call, LVMH brushed off the idea that it should adjust its prices to cope with the current slowdown, which, once again, these companies are so lost in the sauce. They still don't think they should adjust prices, and it's only going to be to their detriment. I don't know why they keep trying to put their foot down when they can clearly see that it isn't working. But anyway, continuing on. The current situation is more demand-driven than offer-driven, Gianni said, addressing short-term issues such as aspirational customers being less present than they used to be by, for instance, introducing a new range of very affordable products. I think it would be a mistake. Still, analysts expect most luxury brands to make an effort to boost more affordable propositions. In September, Gucci released a new range of monogram canvas bags priced around $2,000, dubbed Emblem, as well as following up its $4,000 Blondie bag with a $1,250 chain wallet declination. The rapid pace of designer changes in recent months suggests luxury houses are also betting on a creative jolt to keep up demand, while waiting out the slowdown and waiting for customers to get used to high prices. That's not going to happen, by the way. New creative directors at Fendi and Chanel, yet to be announced, or Givenchy and Tom Ford, both set to debut in February, could introduce novel products, some of which may be more accessibly priced, as well as telling new stories to keep fashion audiences engaged in what brands have to say at a moment where what they have to sell is falling flat. What can we do in this context? First of all, emphasize product innovation. I know it's not the easiest growth driver model, but it is one of the most impactful, LVMH's Gioni said. We have the skill set to harness the creativity of our talent pool and translate it into commercial success. So very, very, very interesting article. Very, very interesting update in terms of the fact that these brands are openly in the open admitting to all of you that they charged their goods at too high of a price. I don't know how many times we need to see evidence of this before, people finally decide that yes, these things are overpriced. And the profit margins are insane. I don't know how many times I need to read different articles. I need to show different proof. You have to have CEOs of the actual brand saying this themselves. I don't know how much more proof we need, guys. I really don't know how much more proof we need. The question I have to all of you, though, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, is was it a good idea for these CEOs to admit that they made mistakes with the pricing? Because I'm seeing two different perspectives. The first perspective is that it kind of builds customer trust because customers are like, okay, at least they're owning up to these things. And that might build some trust. But then the drawback to me is I feel like they are breaking down the dream of what luxury is supposed to signify. So what do you guys think? Positive or negative that these CEOs have been owning up to this? Elle says, I think Burberry's flop kind of hammered it home for a lot of them. Boa says, I think 99% of consumers don't know / care about these CEO interviews. That's true, to be honest. That is true. That's true. Although, the kind of people that would read this article, like people like you watching this live stream, are people really into fashion, other people that I guess work in fashion. And sometimes I do think that influence-wise, fashion has this trickle-down effect from, the tastemakers, people more involved in fashion to the wider public. So if people's favorite celebrities are saying, this is not worth it, even the CEO, admitted to this, I think it could have a trickle-down effect. But you are right in the sense that, 99% of consumers won't even know that this article exists. They will never know that CEOs literally owned up to this stuff. So good point. Lanfari says it could burst the value bubble. I think it kind of already is. Not many people are going to spend £600 on Burberry sneakers. They're not that deep. Even Chloe is more aspirational. Interesting. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of this sentiment. I don't think most consumers get this news, so it doesn't matter. They've basically admitted to the true cost and quality of the overpriced product. Exactly what I was saying, right? That by them saying that at the drop of a hat, they can increase or raise prices as they see fit is quite literally an admission that, the true cost and quality of the products is a lot less than they are charging. Like way less. And some of the rationale for why they increased the prices was, well, other brands are doing it, so why don't we? Nothing to do with quality or, the fact that, because I think that it's fine for prices to be increased. I think that's normal. I think inflation is a thing. So just thinking logically, due to inflation, a lot of raw materials that luxury brands buy will be more expensive with time. So it only makes sense for the actual products to cost more with time. It's just the rate at which they increase the prices is a cause for concern. It's like, at that rate, I don't know who you think you are selling to. Production of almost every luxury product is 200 at most, and that is European made. Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. I've genuinely seen, or it also does depend on the size, economies of scale and all of that, but I know kind of mid-level brands that make stuff that literally costs like 800, 900, 1,000 to produce, like no joke. So I wouldn't say every luxury product is 200 at most to produce. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go that far. But when Dior is making cotton canvas bags, it's definitely very cheap to make. All those like canvas bags at scale by big conglomerates where they have economies of scale on their side. Yes, it is very cheap to make. The interview is out in the open because they rather have some noisy customers reading it If it means investors have the info, we are taking things back into our hands. We'll make money again soon. Interesting. Venus says they shouldn't have admitted to anything, rather introduce an affordable range to keep the fantasy intact. Yeah, that's what I thought they should have done. But when I posted about it on Instagram, quite a lot of people said actually they do like that the brands have admitted, because it kind of shows that now maybe they are prioritizing the middle class consumer and a consumer that isn't super rich. Not because they, out of the kindness of their heart. It's because they have to. Otherwise, their share prices are going to tank. In every economic crisis, a billionaire tried to use the situation to become richer. Burberry wanted to see how much price increasing they could get away with until the consumer screamed. Basically, this article is a scream to stop. Yeah, it reminds me of clothes burning / landfill. So yeah, so many brands historically, destroy excess clothing. I mean, Jesus, even Burberry, we're talking about Burberry right now. Burberry has had multiple scandals where there was evidence of them destroying garments and stuff like that. So, it's very, very funny sometimes, especially when they start talking about sustainability and stuff. I'm like, okay. These next 2 years will create the divide between real luxury and pseudo luxury. For years, brands could hide behind the trending products and styles. Now, fashion is so volatile, you can't fake lux. I agree with that. I agree with that completely. I mean, the CEO had no option other than this interview, as he saw Burberry scarf selling at $250 at Walmart / Target. And also these TikToks were trickled down more than this interview, in my opinion. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, just a quick update. I just wanted to update you guys on the whole Burberry story, and not just Burberry, but just the luxury pricing story in general, and the fact that a lot of these luxury brands are starting to realize that their pricing strategies don't make sense, and a lot of their goods were overpriced, which is something I've been saying for a very long time. So yeah, very, very interesting topic, and hopefully I hope that this means that consumers will be more discerning when buying things. This is something we talk about on the channel all the time, but this article further reiterates that as a consumer, try to be more discerning and not just part with your hard-earned money very easily, considering that these brands are literally admitting to you that, yeah, it wasn't worth it. It was overpriced. Insane. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.